tapped pitless adapter in the slide type. You can see the top picture in the brass has a 3/8 inch piggyback tapping that's tapped into the pressure zone of the pitless, so you can hook up anything you would like into your pressure zone, say pressure switches or pressure transducers at the well controls. Picture on the right is the Bochart stainless steel pitless adapter. It's actually got a 1/4 inch female tap on the back side of it. You'd have to put like a 1/4 inch street 90 or a fitting in here, most likely a 1/4 inch street 90, and you'd point it up to get the same type of connection you would here for either an at the well control, pressure switch, or some of the accessories that you hook into that port. Like I said, a pressure transducer. Some guys put a pressure relief valve in there, so if the pump system does overpressurize, your pressure relief is popping off. It's inside your well, so it's just all the water is gonna go back inside the well rather than having to plumb it out of a mechanical room or not having it plumbed and making a mess, obviously. The picture in the middle is a pressure switch setup, piggybacked onto looks like a Weld on pitless. You'll see this same type of application with at the well controls. Two different types of at the well controls. There's one with like a 6 or 8 foot tube that's full of NSF approved antifreeze, and there's also one that does not have the tube. We just started stocking this one. We get a lot of interest in this at the Waterwell show still. If you got any questions about this stuff, let me know and I can give you the part numbers or tell you where it's at. All the slide type pitless adapters are going to have a weight limit. Campbell's weight limit is actually in feet, and that's feet of whatever size pitless it is of steel pipe full of water. So you take a BA10X or a B10X, is going to be 1 inch drop pipe. You're good to 970 feet. On the Bochart one, they actually give you the weight instead of the feet. It's in weight, so you'd have to calculate your pipe size with the water in it, calculate your pump weight, calculate your wire size and the wire weight, and figure it that way. The Bochart stainless steel pitlesses have a higher working load than the Campbell pitless adapters. There's Weld on pitless adapters, where you see the picture. See the picture on the right, where if you buy this pitless, it comes with a template. You cut that square section out of the well casing, then you actually weld this red section onto the well casing, and then it's same kind of a slide or a wedge style on the inside to connect the inside components to the actual well casing. This style of pitless, you'll get a lot heavier weight limits. They make these in 1 inch through 4 inch as far as the drop pipe size. Well casing is basically, on the smaller ones you can do 4 inch. The larger ones like the 10J4s, you can go all the way up to 16 or 20 inch well casing. And here's kind of an overview of that. So I think we stock an 8J3, the weight limit of 10,000 pounds, has 3 inch discharge, 3 inch drop pipe. It'll fit well cased from 8 inch minimum all the way up to 12 inch plus. So you could basically put this on any size well. A lot of guys don't like these style because they're such a pain in the ass to set the drop pipe or set the inside. It's kind of a trick to get this to set inside the wedge or the slide fit. So a lot of guys will avoid these. unless they have to use them, obviously, but they're quite a bit less money than, say, a pitless unit. If you need something with 4-inch drop pipe or something, your only option would be something like this or an actual pitless unit. Another pitless style is the Clearway, or you could hear them called the Snappy, which is a Baker monitor product, or the Bulldog, which is another Baker monitor product. Snappy and Bulldog, the difference is galvanized or brass. Usually the sizes for these, I think the only ones out there are like 1.25 inch for your drop pipe, and fits the smaller well casings, 4-inch through 6-inch. The reason you would use one of these primarily is because say on 5-inch well casing or 4-inch well casing, if you'd put a BA10X in a 4-inch well casing, you wouldn't be able to get a 4-inch submersible pump in it because of the stationary piece would extend into the well casing so much you couldn't get a path. So that's where you'll see these things used. There's kind of another picture of it installed. So you got a clamp, some kind of a clamping device around the well casing. The piece on the outside is the stationary piece has got an O-ring behind it. And when you set the inside piece, the whole inside part of the well casing is available for a full opening. Generally, they'll have some kind of a release device on the back. This one's got a cable attached to a spring actuated lever or an arm on the back side. And when you remove the pitless, you have to pull that stainless steel cable up and then work the inside of the pitless out to pull it up. Again, these can kind of be tricky to set because you got to go down and then you got to somehow push that. Of course, the lever helps you, but push that inside assembly into the stationary part as you're setting the pitless. A couple other pitless adapters, not so common. The one in the top left, you would see in like a convertible jet pump application where you've got 2 pipes going down the well to your deep well jet pump. They make a pitless for that. We don't stock it, but we've sold a few over the years. The one on the top right is actually a sewage disconnect. It resembles a pitless, but in a sewage application. Primarily the threads on both sides are going to be 2-inch, obviously for sewage. I don't know if they make them any larger than 2-inch. But we do stock that one. We've come across some really oddball stuff. A guy will call and he'll try to explain a pitless. This one on the bottom left is from Merrill Manufacturing. It looks like a contraption to me. I've never had any experience with it, but it looks complicated. There's a chance you could come across stuff like this. Different manufacturers make some different stuff. The one on the right kind of resembles a Weld-on, but it's more of a heavy-duty clamp-on style, kind of like the Clearway pitless that we talked about a little bit ago. So pitless unit, the difference between the pitless unit and a pitless adapter is a pitless unit will actually take place of the top 6 or 8 feet of your well casing. So you cut your well casing off where you install a pitless unit, and the whole head of your well is now a pitless unit. It's considered a pitless. You'll see this primarily in larger pump systems, municipal projects. Every municipal well that I've ever seen has a pitless unit on it. The sizes, I mean, they get all the way down to 4-inch well size, so they come in the smaller sizes. In fact, North Dakota state regulations require every well to have a pitless unit on it. I'm not sure why they do that, but in Billings and Sydney, we stock a couple of the pitless units with the North Dakota spec. Most of them are either a 4-inch well or a 5-inch well. So on the pitless unit, you got a couple different ways to connect to your well casing. The smaller ones can either be threaded connection or what Baker calls their quick connect style, which is basically just a compression adapter on the bottom of the pitless. So you slide it over your well casing, tighten the bolts around it, and away you go. So to size the pitless units is a series of numbers. You can kind of see on the right what each one of them means. Generally starts with your bury depth. PS is always going to be part of the part number. The next two numbers are your well size and then the upper casing. The upper casing is always going to be one size larger than your well size because of the spool, the way that the spool fits inside the pitless unit. Your well casing, say that this is 4-inch here, your upper casing on your pitless unit will be 5-inch. If it was 6, this would be 8. If this is 8, this would be 10, so on and so forth. A couple other things that the part number will tell you is your connection, and would stand for quick connect. The B is always going to be B unless it's something uncommon. I don't know what the options there are. I suppose if you needed stainless steel or something, that might change. But check valves. Baker used to put check valves in the spools of the pitless units. They don't do that anymore, so that's always going to be an S0. All the domestic pitless units are like the 4 and the 5 and the 6-inch, kind of lighter duty. They do not come with a well cap. The well cap has to be ordered separately. If you look at some of our stock, so that unit right there is one of the North Dakota specs. So 7-foot bury. PS is just a pitless unit for submersible pump. I fit a 5-inch well, 6-inch upper casing, black upper pipe. N stands for quick connect. S for CO. I thought indicated the drop pipe size, but that should be a 2. Anyhow, the CO stands for less cap. So if you see that CO in the part number, that would indicate that the pitless unit does not come with a cap. So if you were selling a well cap with this pitless, it'd have to be a 7-inch well cap, or I'm sorry, a 6-inch well cap, because that you got a 5-inch well, but your upper case 6-inch. And normally you would sell a well cap with pitless, so you'd want to make sure you get a 6-inch, not a 5-inch. I guess S4 is just indicates school without check. So that's what the S4 indicates. So most of the domestic pitless units have a 2-inch discharge, 2-inch drop pipe. In fact, well, all the ones that we stock. If you order say 1.5 inches from Baker, really all they'll do is put 1.5 inch bushing in it. So we'll just stock the 2-inch. So an industrial pitless unit, usually the industrial units start at 6-inch. go all the way up through 30-inch. That's an awful big pitless unit. Connection styles for the industrial units would be either welded or the compression style. They do make a threaded version of that. You'd have to buy an adapter from Baker. Basically, it's just a thread by welded adapter to put in the bottom of the pitless that's into your weld case. That's kind of an example of how they're installed. Another thing to be cautious about is the bury depth. When you size a pitless unit, the very first number is the bury depth. Baker accounts for 12 inches of bury depth between grade and the top of the well. You can see there it says 12 inches, so a 3-foot bury would be 3 foot from grade to your discharge would leave you 12 inches above grade. So that pitless unit, in theory, would be about 4 feet long. Realize that in Montana, the state code is 18 inches from grade to the top of the well. So always add, somebody wants a 6-foot bury, either go up to a 6.5, like a 6.5 PS or a 7 PS. So you make sure you get your full 18 inches of your wellhead above grade in Montana. So if you look through all the pitless unit part numbers in category 498, you won't see very many 6-foot buries. They'll all be 6.5s or 7s or 8s or even deeper. The part number sizing on the industrial units is basically the same as the domestic units. Most of the numbers mean the same thing. A little bit different on the connections. And also in both units, there's a flowing well option as well. So in a flowing well unit, the spool is going to be a solid spool with tapped ports through the spool for the wires that come through the spool for your submersible pump or probe tubes or anything else that you got to access through the spool. So like on this one in the picture here, you can almost see like a big oval opening. That would be a standard pitless spool, versus the one on the left would be a flowing well spool, and then the cable seals that you need to purchase separately to install into the spool to get your wires through the spool. Cable seals sold separately on the domestic units only. On the industrial units, they'll generally come with the unit. You'll have to specify the wire size. I'll get to that in a second. But one thing to be cautious of on the flowing well pitless units is the pressure of the well. That's the static close-in pressure of a flowing well. In other words, if you were to cap that well off with nowhere for the water to go, that's the static pressure that the well will build. Flowing wells can be anywhere from 1 or 2 pounds to 100 pounds. Some of the deep wells up in around Big Sky or hot water wells, they can build some serious pressure. There's limitations to the standard units, the flowing well units. If you get a high pressure well, you got to make sure that you let Baker know when they're working up a quote, and they'll do some special things to increase it. So on the flowing well units, you're always going to have what you call a hold down mechanism, because something has to hold that spool into the pitless unit, so the pressure of the flowing well doesn't push the spool out. So on the standard domestic units, you'll have what they call a spider, which is connected to the top of your lift out pipe. So there's set screws all around this spider that you would tighten up against the well casing once you get the spool set to where you want it to be. And that'll hold that spool in place. On the higher pressure ones, they have what they call hold down hooks. So on the top of your well casing or the top of your pitless unit, you'll have some little pieces of pipe basically that are welded to the outside of this casing that'll hold these hooks. So these hooks fasten to the top portion of your pitless unit, and you tighten these nuts as you set your spool. This type of hold down hooks will give you a lot greater pressure rating than just the standard spider. Cable seals again. I think I got a slide on cable seals. So cable seals have to be sized. Number one, for the port, threaded port that's on the top of your pitless unit, there's going to be threads in here. And also, you got to size them to your wire size. We stock a couple different ones, one with a 3/8 and also I think one with a 1/2 inch threaded connection, and then always look at the wire size. There's a range. I think our smaller ones will go from number 12 wire through either number 8 or number 6 wire. There would be a chance maybe that you'd have to order something separately that we don't stock if you're using something outside kind of the normal everyday application. Any questions on that? This really isn't a pitless, but it kind of goes with a regular pitless adapter, a standard, say a clearway or a swedge style. It's the well buster, sold now by Moss Midwest. Basically what you do, it's for a flowing well, to keep the flow of the well from coming through the top of the well casing. You install a standard pitless adapter, and then you put a well buster over the top of the pitless adapter. It's got an inflatable packer at the end of the, say a 6-foot rod would be the most common in our area. And it's got cable seals basically already built into it with the wire. I think the well busters come with the wire through the epoxy through the packer. So you'll have to do a splice to your submersible pump underneath the packer, and then of course take off with your UF wire or whatever from the top side. But these things actually are not that much less than a pitless unit. If you're talking about like a 4 or 5 or even a 6-inch unit, they might be a couple $100 less than an actual pitless unit. I guess a couple $100 is a couple $100, but the pitless unit would do, I think, a lot more longevity and would be well worth the extra couple $100 to do a pitless instead of one of these. But there again, we sold them. I think we stocked 1 or 2 different models or used to. I don't know if we still have them, but other than that, I just got some pictures. I just pulled off the internet of some different pitless applications. So this one on the left is actually a pitless unit that's installed. My guess is it's a flowing well pitless, and he's got a pressure gauge set up here measuring the static pressure, the hold-in pressure of the well. I don't know what that would be, but it does not look like it has hold-down hooks. Otherwise, there'd be some little pieces of pipe welded out here to hold in to hold down. Likely just a spider on this unit. Looks like maybe it's a, I don't know, 3-foot bury, judging by that guy's height and how deep it's in the ground. The picture on the right is an actual spool that's lifted out of an existing pitless. You can kind of see this is not a flowing well spool. It's got open passages on both sides for your wire to go through. On the top and the bottom of the spool, you're always going to have an O-ring. We do stock replacement O-rings for the pitless adapters as well as the pitless spools for most sizes. There's always going to be 2 O-rings sold for a spool, or you should, I would assume somebody would want to replace them both. So you should always have at least 2 of these in stock. One's not going to do you a whole lot of good. The picture on the left is just like a swedge style pitless adapter being installed. Cut a hole in the well casing. You rig yourself up a pull pipe, which is basically just a piece of 1 inch or 1.25 inch pipe, depending on the size of the tap. Put a T-handle on top of it. So what you do is you lower this down the well on the installation. You see he's got his pitless adapter connected on the bottom here. Lower it down the well. You push out the male nipple through here, put on your gasket, and then your backing nut, your backing plate and your nut, you secure that so you get the support of your drop pipe plus the discharge to the well. So that's what that would look like. Pictures on the left, or on the right rather. There's a flowing well. That's a pretty good amount of water coming out of that well. There again, there's a spool. I can't really tell if that's, I don't think that's a flowing well spool. The wires would be separated through some cable seals. You see the O-ring on the top and O-ring on the bottom. And your discharge, or your drop pipe rather, would be connected on this end. As your pump's flowing water, it's going to flow water through this spool and discharge it between these 2 O-rings, and then kick it out the discharge of the pitless unit. A couple other pictures. There's one with the pull-out pipe. So that pitless is either being ready to be pulled out or just got set, one of the two. This picture down here is a pitless that was just installed. Here he's cutting a hole. On the top right is a picture of the snappy pitless. You can see that little lever, spring actuated lever that folds down behind the internal portion of the pitless adapter and keeps it engaged, so the pressure of your system doesn't push it out, separate that O-ring connection. So to release this pitless or to service it, to pull it out, you'd have to pull the cable which lifts this lever up, work the pitless, the internal portion of the pitless out into the well casing, and then you'd pull your pump that way. Kind of a pain in the ass. And then the bottom one is a weld-on pitless after installation. You can see how it's welded on there. A couple other ones. Here's a well buster being installed. Another pitless unit. Looks like a pretty shallow set compared to what we see in Montana. Top right, that's probably one of them 30-inch spools. That's a big ass spool there. Then the picture on the bottom right is the swedge style pitless installed. So you can see in a 4-inch well casing where this portion would stick into the well casing too much to get a 4-inch pump past that. So that's where you'd use a clearway. So my guess is this is either in probably a 6-inch well. I don't know what this thing in the middle is, but so that's really all I got. Here's another one of Campbell's Waterwell accessories. Obviously, we talked about the pitless adapters today. What do you guys? Where do you guys want to take it from here? Anybody got any ideas? Anybody got any questions?